We're talking with Professor David Oppenheimer about affirmative action and the three ways that that's being approached. But before we return to that, a little bit about yourself. Are you from here, the Bay Area originally?
No, I grew up in New York City, but I moved out here in the 1970s. As you mentioned, I went to law school at Harvard, and I was a research assistant to the same con law professor that President Obama was a research assistant to a generation later. And then in my third year of law school, I participated in what I think of as a foreign exchange program, in that I spent my last year at Berkeley. And between Harvard and Berkeley, it was definitely a foreign exchange. It was a whole different world.
But you did your undergraduate, though.
I did my undergraduate work in California as well, in Berkeley as well. But coming back as a third-year law student, I realized this is really where I want to settle down. So since the 1970s, I have lived here in California, mostly in the Bay Area.
Grew up in New York City?
New York City.
Why law? What interested you?
You know, I grew up at a time when civil rights lawyers were heroes. And I was involved with the civil rights movement from the time that I was a teenager, and I just couldn't imagine a greater job than being a lawyer and being a civil rights lawyer.
Why'd you get into Harvard Law? Why? What do they see in you?
I can't imagine. You know, for many years, I thought that there must have been some other David Oppenheimer who got into Penn and Yale and Columbia and couldn't figure out why he didn't get into Harvard. There's something called the imposter syndrome. And it's a big issue with our students, because so many of our students feel like we made a mistake in admitting them to Berkeley. That they feel like imposters. And this is true for students of all kinds, but it's particularly true for minority students, it's particularly true for women, that they feel like, how do I belong at this elite institution? And it's actually something that we have to talk to them about and combat and make them understand. I tell the students when they arrive that there are lots of hard decisions that have to be made on the admissions committee. But the students who we admit, they were the easy decisions. The hard decisions were the students that we had to deny, who we would have also liked to have admitted.
That's fascinating. That's time here. You're married and you have twin sons. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And your wife worked in journalism?
She did. She was a journalist, and she's now retired.
And working in some tutoring programs. And your boys?
One of them is a restaurateur, and the other is a policy advocate in alternative energy. Both doing really, really interesting work.
Great. Neither one of them went into law, though.
Well, the one who does policy work actually went to law school and then realized that what he really wanted to do was policy work. So he has a legal education and uses it all the time, but he's not practicing law.
East Bay resident then for some time. Well, let's get back to talking about affirmative action. And you talked to us about race, and now talk to us a little bit more about class.
Sure. So let's go back to Dr. King for a minute. One of the things that Dr. King proposed was a program to eradicate poverty. And he worked with President Johnson in establishing the war on poverty. He spoke to the Kerner Commission, the 1966 Civil Rights Commission, about the importance of eradicating poverty. And he said at the time that this is going to benefit black people enormously. It's also going to benefit poor white people. And that's appropriate, because poverty is a disease that we have to eliminate in this country. And interestingly, in talking about poverty and black Americans, what he said was that under the common law, there is a principle of restitution or reparations in which people whose labor have been stolen are entitled to restitution, including restitution to their families, even if they're gone. And that justified a program to eliminate poverty in the United States. So it was very much a combination of trying to do something important in terms of helping black Americans, but doing it through an approach that took account of class rather than race. Now, it's not that he believed in that exclusively. Again, he also believed in racial quotas in employment, but he saw those as two prongs of a three-pronged attack to help to remedy the problem of racism and racial discrimination.
Okay, so you're talking really about economic disparity is class. That's what
right.
That's what you mean. And so this is a way to shrink this sort of thing. You wrote a law review article and then for the Daily Cal at one point and talked about the inequities. And I'm looking for the real diversity, racism, higher education, and the real cost of baked goods. And you said where people live and where they go to school, it's at a disadvantage.
It's enormously important in terms of somebody's future. The community in which they grow up, the school that they attend, these have great impact in terms of being able to predict where that person is going to go, what kind of success that person is going to have. You know, everyone who works hard feels like, I did this because I worked hard. But the truth is that I, for example, and I think I've worked hard, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. But it's also my white privilege, my male privilege, my economic privilege, my having grown up in an upper middle class family. All of these things are important.
Right, and so you're dealing with the economic thing of class is the second one. And we talked about race and we talked about class. Now, right before we go to break, when we come back, you're going to talk about geographic.
I am, and I'm going to talk about Dr. King's efforts to rebuild our cities and to focus on the problem of cities, which again was race blind, but one of the three forms of affirmative action that he advocated during his lifetime.
We're talking with Professor David Oppenheimer on affirmative action and the three ways that's being addressed. When we come back, he will wrap it up in our fourth segment. Thanks.